Tonight, we travel back 2,000 years to a world of crowded marketplaces, painted porches, and philosophers who looked like they had never smiled in their lives. The Stoics, with their stern faces and endless lectures, somehow became the rock stars of ancient Rome. But here's the twist. Buried beneath their serious tone is wisdom so sharp and surprisingly practical, it could make even our modern chaos feel a little less overwhelming. Imagine living in a world where plagues swept through cities, wars broke out constantly, and emperors threw tantrums bigger than Twitter meltdowns. And yet people still managed to keep calm without caffeine or Wi-Fi. The Stoics thrived in that storm, teaching that you can't always control what happens, but you can control yourself. A lesson we might need when stuck in traffic or when your favorite show buffers at the worst moment. This is not philosophy for marble statues and toga parties. It is for anyone tired of stress, endless noise, and the urge to scream at customer support. Marcus Aurelius scribbled notes to himself that read like therapy sessions. Seneca wrote letters that sound suspiciously like tough love emails, and Epictetus turned a life of hardship into a masterclass in resilience. Their lessons on calm, courage, and perspective are as relevant now as when swords clashed in the Colosseum. So, before you roll your eyes at dusty old philosophers, remember this: the Stoics weren't trying to impress, they were trying to survive, and in their survival, they left us a playbook. Like the video. Subscribe. Because tonight, we rediscover the lost wisdom of the Stoics and learn how ancient teachings might just be the peace we've been searching for all along, passed without even a glance. A battered manuscript, the kind with faded ink and stiff, yellowed pages, sat unnoticed on a shelf that bent under its weight. Its spine had long ago given up on being neat. Its cover sagged like a tired face. Yet inside, hidden between the ordered words of Stoic philosophy, was a scribble, a small note left by a hand long gone. The words seemed rushed, almost desperate, as though the writer had been afraid of being caught. It asked a question: how can one be free in a world full of chains? The moment those words were seen, the world seemed to pause. The library lights flickered once, the hum deepened, and the shadows at the edge of the shelves seemed to lean closer. Suddenly, the library was not just a place of study. It became a doorway. You could almost feel a shift, like stepping across a threshold, from a room filled with paper to a space charged with something dangerous and alive. Imagine it. One careless note in the corner of a page, left behind hundreds of years ago, capable of pulling you across centuries into the mind of someone who once wrestled with the same storms of thought that rage in you. The pen that wrote it was long gone, the hand turned to dust, yet the question burned as fresh as a glowing ember hidden in ash. Who was that reader, and what fear or longing made them write it? Stoicism was never meant to be a dead philosophy. Its words were not carved to gather dust, but to be lived, tested, even doubted. And here was the proof. A restless voice in the margins, reminding us that ancient advice is not just history, it is medicine, still potent for hearts beating now. The marginal note is not only a relic, it is an invitation. It does not wait politely for you to finish homework or answer texts, it demands attention. The room becomes heavier, the air thick, as though the old Stoic masters lean forward with their questions, urging you to sit down and listen. The library becomes a porch, not painted with bright colours like the one in Athens, but built of shelves and light, waiting for you to step inside. To open the book is to open a door, and beyond that door lies a quest, not one filled with swords or monsters, but with something even more difficult, the challenge of taming the storms inside your own chest. The Stoics whisper of calm, of steadiness, of a peace that no bad news or cruel word can break. But they do not promise it easily. They ask you to test yourself, to look at the world without flinching, and to ask whether freedom lies not in changing the world, but in changing the way you walk through it. And so, under the tired hum of library lights, the journey begins, with one scribbled note that refuses to stay silent. The door is open, will you step through? The story begins not with triumph, but with disaster. Zeno of Citium, a merchant travelling the seas around the year 300 before Christ, found his fortune swallowed by water. His ship sank, carrying with it all the wealth he had worked for, every piece of cargo gone into the waves. Imagine it, standing on the shore with nothing, the ocean mocking you with the pieces of your life floating just out of reach. Most would have crumbled, but Zeno did not. The loss did not end him. It became the beginning. Wandering Athens with his pockets empty, Zeno stepped into a bookshop. Inside, he read about Socrates, the philosopher who had challenged men to think deeply, to question, to live with courage and clarity. Zeno was struck not by riches or fame, but by the idea that wisdom could not be stolen by storms, that the calm of the mind could remain even when fortune was cruel. He sought out teachers, eager to learn how thought could rebuild what the sea had taken. From these studies, something new was born, not a philosophy of ivory towers or hidden cloisters, but a wisdom meant for streets, markets, and the noise of daily life. Zeno began to teach not in a closed school, but in a public place, the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch of Athens. Anyone could come and listen. It was a place of merchants and workers, soldiers and wanderers. Philosophy was not locked away. It was spoken in the open air, painted by sunlight and echoed by footsteps on stone. Fire in the Stoa, that is how it felt. A living flame of thought that spread from the ruin of one man's fortune to ignite the minds of many. Stoicism was not born in comfort. It was forged in loss. Zeno's shipwreck was not a curse, but a teacher, showing that true power comes not from possessions, but from the ability to remain steady when possessions vanish. The lesson is simple yet piercing. You do not control the storm, but you control the way you face it. This was the foundation of Stoicism, a call to build strength not on sand, but on the solid ground of character. The painted porch became a symbol of resilience, a place where wisdom met the world as it was, noisy, unpredictable, and rough. The people who listened were not promised safety or wealth. They were promised steadiness. They were told that courage, justice, wisdom, and temperance were treasures no wave could sink. To walk away from the Stoa was to carry fire inside, a flame that would not go out even in the darkest night. Zeno's own words have mostly been lost, but his life remains a message. Out of ruin came a philosophy that still guides us. Out of loss came the strength to teach others how to face their own storms. Fire in the Stoa, born from shipwreck, passed on to anyone willing to listen, then and now. The Stoics spoke of a world without borders, a place where every person belonged to a single city. They called it the cosmopolis, the great city of the universe, and within it no one was truly foreign. Imagine standing under a night sky, the stars stretched like lanterns across an endless ceiling, and realizing that you are connected to every soul who has ever looked up at the same lights. To the Stoics, this was not poetry, it was reality. They taught that all people are threads in one vast fabric, woven together by reason and shared existence. This idea was not born out of luxury, but out of necessity. Wars raged, empires rose and fell, tribes clashed, and yet the Stoics asked, what if we are not enemies but neighbours in the same home? Sympatheia, the word they used, meant that everything is linked, that your fate is tied to mine, that the suffering of one ripples through the whole. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled in the 2nd century after Christ, often reminded himself in his private notes that he must treat others as fellow citizens of the world. Even when betrayed, insulted, or surrounded by selfishness, he wrote that the wrongdoer was still his kin, still part of the same body. To harm another was to harm oneself. To turn against humanity was to tear at the very city you live in. For us today, this ancient vision carries surprising power. Look around at how quickly anger spreads online, how doom-scrolling magnifies outrage, how easy it is to divide the world into us and them. The Stoics whisper a different perspective. If the world is one city, then the person posting from across the planet is not an enemy, but a neighbor. Their joy and their pain echo in your own life, even if the connection feels invisible. Imagine if every hateful comment, every cruel remark, was answered not with more fire, but with the thought, "This person is my fellow citizen. Their struggle is tied to mine." Their blindness does not erase our shared place in the cosmos. Such thinking does not erase justice or responsibility, but it shrinks anger into something manageable, something you can hold without burning yourself. To live as a citizen of the whole is to step back from the noise and see the bigger picture. The Stoics trained themselves to rise above narrow concerns, to see not just the tribe or the nation, but the human race, even life itself, as one. In this view, the divisions that fuel conflict lose their teeth. The stranger becomes kin. The enemy becomes a reflection of your own flaws. The cosmos itself becomes your home, and you are never truly alone. In the world as one city, you are reminded that peace does not come from shutting others out, but from remembering that every voice belongs to the same chorus. When you see the whole, the noise softens, and the dread begins to fade. Epictetus knew chains. Born a slave in the 1st century after Christ, he lived at the mercy of masters, stripped of choices most people take for granted. Yet in that condition, where almost nothing was his to decide, he discovered a freedom greater than any coin or crown. He called it prohairesis, the ruling faculty of choice, the one thing no whip, no emperor, no storm could ever take away. This discovery became the heart of his teaching, and it still stands as a compass for anyone drowning in the chaos of life. The Stoics split the world in two. There are things you control and things you do not. You control your opinions, your decisions, your words, and the way you respond. You do not control the weather, the market, the words others speak, or whether fortune favors you. The mistake most people make, then and now, is pouring energy into the wrong side of the line. We try to bend the world to our will, furious when it resists, and neglect the space we actually command, the space within. Epictetus taught his students to carry this filter like armor. Before reacting, ask, "Is this within my control? If yes, then act wisely. If no, then accept it." This was not an excuse to shrug and surrender, but a call to stop wasting strength on what cannot be moved. Imagine the serenity of living this way. The traffic jam no longer steals your peace, because you cannot move the cars, but you can choose your attitude. A cruel comment loses its sting because you cannot control another person's mouth, but you can govern your own response. Even sickness or poverty become less crushing, because while your body and your purse may weaken, your character remains your own to shape. Epictetus himself was a walking example. His body was frail, his leg crippled, his status low, but his spirit burned with a calm no master could break. He reminded his students that the true chains are not on wrists, but on minds that cling to what is not theirs. Freedom, he said, belongs to those who master their inner world, no matter how little control they hold outside it. For us today, this teaching is almost a lifeline. Social media storms, school pressures, family conflicts, and the endless news cycle bombard us with forces far beyond our steering. It is easy to drown in frustration, yet the Stoic filter clears the water. Control what is yours, release what is not. This simple practice becomes a shield against despair, a map through uncertainty, a reminder that peace is always closer than it seems. The dichotomy of control is not meant to numb you, but to sharpen you. It does not say do nothing, it says act where it matters most, in the space no storm can touch. Epictetus proved it from the chains of slavery. We can prove it in our own lives, no matter the chaos that presses in. The Stoics believed that within every person there is a commander, a guiding mind they called the hegemonikon. It is the part of you that decides whether to panic or stay steady, to lash out or hold your peace, to be dragged by impulses or to steer them. Most people never meet this inner commander because they live as captives of reflex. Something happens, and before they have thought, their mouths have already spoken, their hearts have already leapt, their fists have already clenched. The Stoics warned that such living is like being pulled by wild horses, dragged across rough ground with no reins in your hands. Training the ruling faculty begins with noticing impressions. An impression is the very first spark, the instant when something strikes you. It might be a sudden insult, a frightening sound, or the sight of someone you envy. The impression tells you a story at lightning speed, whispering that you must be angry, or afraid, or ashamed. If you are untrained, you believe it without question. But the Stoics said you have a choice. You can pause. You can hold the impression before you like a coin in your hand and examine whether it is true, whether it deserves your assent. This is the secret power they practiced, the ability to withhold consent until the mind has judged. Imagine someone shouts at you in the hallway. The impression leaps up. This is an attack. You must strike back. But if you catch it, if you let the commander decide, you may see it differently. Maybe the person is in pain. Maybe the insult says more about them than about you. Maybe silence or calm words are the better answer. This is not weakness. It is strength of the highest kind, because anyone can react, but only the trained can choose. Marcus Aurelius, who commanded legions and ruled an empire, often reminded himself in his writings that the mind is stronger than any impression if you give it space. He wrote that the ruling faculty should remain like a rock, against which waves break, steady and unmoved. For him, every day was filled with pressures, betrayals, and responsibilities, yet he believed the mind could remain its own master. To train this power is not quick. It requires practice, the way a musician must repeat scales or an athlete must drill movements. The Stoics recommended daily reflection, examining where you reacted too quickly, where you failed to hold the impression, and where you succeeded. Each attempt, even a small one, strengthens the commander within. In a world of constant notifications, instant replies, and endless noise, this ancient practice is more urgent than ever. The ruling faculty can cut through chaos. It can remind you that not every message demands a reply, not every provocation deserves your anger, not every fear deserves your surrender. The hegemonikon is your shield and your sword, not against others, but against the storm inside yourself. When it is trained, you are no longer dragged by wild horses. You hold the reins, you ride steady. The Stoics said something that sounded strange then, and still sounds strange now. They claimed that only one thing is truly good. Not money, not health, not fame, not victory, only virtue. At first, it feels impossible. How can anyone call courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom the only treasures worth having, while dismissing wealth, beauty, and luck as indifferent? Yet the more you think about it, the more sense it makes. Fortune is wild. One day it lifts you up, the next it casts you down. If your peace depends on fortune, then your peace is never safe. But if your peace depends on your character, it rests on ground no storm can shake. The Stoics broke virtue into 4 parts. Courage is the strength to face fear, to stand steady when the world trembles. Justice is fairness, treating others rightly, resisting the urge to take more than your share. Temperance is self-control, the ability to hold back when desire pulls too hard. Wisdom is knowing what truly matters and acting in line with that knowledge. Together, these 4 become like the walls of a fortress. Live within them, and you are safe. Step outside, and the winds of chance will sweep you away. Success today is often measured in trophies, grades, likes, or dollars. The Stoics remind us these are not real successes, only shadows. A person may gain all of them and yet be greedy, cruel, or weak. Another may lose all of them and yet live nobly? Who is truly richer? Who truly wins? Marcus Aurelius once wrote that a good man is not harmed by misfortune, only by abandoning virtue. He knew this as more than theory. As Emperor of Rome in the 2nd century after Christ, he faced plagues, wars, and betrayals. Yet in his journals, he did not boast of victories or lament losses. He asked himself whether he had lived justly, whether he had met hardship with courage, whether he had controlled his desires, whether he had sought wisdom. This was his measure of success, a measure no enemy could strip away. Seneca, writing letters in the 1st century after Christ, warned that people chase wealth as if it guarantees happiness, but wealth can be stolen or wasted. Virtue, he said, is the only thing you carry with you always, the one possession that never leaves. Even Epictetus, born a slave, insisted he was freer than his masters, because no one could rob him of the power to act with justice and wisdom. For us, the lesson strikes deep. When we tie our worth to results, we are hostages to chance. When we tie it to virtue, we are free. The scoreboard may favor someone else, the world may ignore us, fortune may even break our bodies, but character remains. To live with courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom is to win a victory greater than wealth or fame. It is to build a life where peace no longer depends on luck, but on the unshakable ground of who you choose to be. The Stoics had a strange way of talking about life's treasures. They said things like health, wealth, and reputation were not true goods, but what they called preferred indifference. At first, this sounds like a contradiction. How can something be preferred and yet indifferent at the same time? But the idea was not to dismiss these things as worthless. It was to put them in their proper place, useful to have, but never essential for peace. Imagine health. Everyone wants to be healthy, to move without pain, to breathe easily, to live long. The Stoics agreed this was preferable. But they warned that if you treat health as the highest good, you will fear sickness, hate aging, and despair when the body fails, as it always does in time. Better to see health as a gift, one you enjoy when you have it but release without bitterness when it fades. Wealth is the same. It allows comfort, opportunity, and ease. Yet, history is filled with wealthy people who were restless, cruel, or afraid. Seneca, himself a rich man, admitted that wealth is useful, but he reminded his friends that fortune can strip it away overnight. To tie happiness to gold is to live in constant fear of losing it. Reputation, too, is a preferred indifferent. To be respected feels good. To be praised can open doors. But if your peace depends on the applause of others, then you become a puppet, dancing whenever the crowd demands. Marcus Aurelius, who wore the crown of Rome, wrote in his journal that the cheers of the crowd are nothing but the noise of people who will soon be dust. Their approval fades quickly, like smoke in the wind. Preferred indifferents teach a delicate balance. You can want them, you can work for them, you can use them wisely when they come, but you must never cling to them as if your soul depends on them. Desire should be gentle, not desperate, so that when fortune gives, you are grateful, and when fortune takes, you remain calm. Epictetus told his students to think of life like a festival. If food is handed to you, enjoy it. If not, do not grab or fight, simply wait your turn. To live this way is to carry lightness inside, to walk through the world without chains. For us today, the lesson is almost radical. Every commercial shouts that happiness is in the next purchase. Every feed tells us our worth is measured in followers, likes, or flawless bodies. The Stoics whisper otherwise. These things are fine to prefer, but they are not what makes life good. What matters is how you use them, how you hold them, and how ready you are to let them go. True peace comes not from what you have, but from how you choose to see it. Fortune may smile, fortune may frown, but your balance does not have to sway. Preferred indifferents are like passing clouds, and you remain the sky. The Stoics practiced a strange habit that many today might confuse with gloom. They called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. It was not a ritual of despair, but a rehearsal of the mind, a way of imagining loss and hardship so that fear lost its teeth. To a Stoic, the danger was not pain itself, but being surprised by it. If you expect storms, you are not destroyed when the sky darkens. If you prepare for setbacks, you are steadier when they arrive. Picture a Roman philosopher at dawn, standing before his day with eyes closed. He whispers to himself, "Today someone will insult me. Today I may lose money. Today sickness may come. Today death itself may visit." At first, these words sound like curses, but for him they are armor. By walking through the possible shadows before the sun rises, he enters the day ready. If the insult comes, he smiles because he saw it already. If loss strikes, he steadies because he has already rehearsed it. Nothing shocks him because nothing was ignored. Seneca, in the 1st century after Christ, wrote letters to his friends, reminding them to think of poverty, exile, even death, not to live in dread, but to shrink their power. He explained that fortune has no real surprise for the mind that has already pictured her blows. Marcus Aurelius too filled his private notes with warnings to himself that cruelty, betrayal, and loss were waiting outside his chambers. Yet he wrote these reminders with calm, not with despair. For him, seeing the worst in advance meant that when it happened, it felt lighter, like a burden he had already lifted many times. For us today, this practice can feel unsettling. Why think about bad things when life is already stressful? But the truth is that fear feeds on shock. The Stoics sought to starve it. Imagine if before checking your phone, you quietly told yourself, "Today I may see bad news." Then when the headlines scream, you are not shaken. Imagine telling yourself, "Today someone may be rude." Then, when it happens, you breathe, already prepared. By facing the shadows in imagination, you make them smaller in reality. This is not pessimism, it is training. Just as athletes rehearse plays before the game, the Stoics rehearsed pain before it came. By picturing cold, hunger, rejection, or loss, they discovered they could endure them in thought and so endure them more calmly in life. Epictetus reminded his students to kiss their children while remembering they are mortal, not to spoil the sweetness but to deepen it, so that love grew sharper and gratitude stronger. This is the hidden gift of premeditatio malorum. It is not about expecting misery, but about treasuring what you have because you know it is fragile. By imagining loss, you love more deeply. By rehearsing hardship, you fear less. The practice does not darken the day, it brightens it, because when you are ready for anything, you can walk into life with unshakable peace. The Stoics carried a reminder that many of us try to hide from. They called it memento mori, remember, you must die. At first it sounds harsh, like a shadow meant to darken every joy. But to them, it was not about despair. It was about sharpening the taste of life, about waking up to the fragile beauty of every breath. Seneca wrote letters in the 1st century after Christ, where he urged his friends to keep death close, not as a threat, but as a guide. He said that if you live each day as if it were complete in itself, then no loss can rob you, because you have already lived fully. To waste time, he warned, is the only true poverty, for time is the one treasure that cannot be repaid. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who ruled Rome in the 2nd century after Christ, filled his journals with the same thought. He wrote that you could leave life at any moment, so let that moment find you doing what is worthy of a human being. For him, awareness of death was not meant to paralyze but to motivate. It reminded him to treat others kindly, to do his duty, to live with clarity, because tomorrow was not promised. To remember death is also to remember life. Memento mori leads directly to memento vitae, remember you must live. When you hold mortality close, gratitude swells. The ordinary becomes precious. The sound of laughter, the warmth of the sun, even the weight of small troubles feel different when you know they will not last forever. Death is the edge that gives life its shape. Without it, days would blur into endless grey. With it, every day becomes a chance, fragile and brilliant. The Stoics did not encourage morbid obsession. They encouraged gentle urgency. Do not postpone kindness until tomorrow. Do not bury your dreams under excuses. Do not wait for the perfect time, because time itself is slipping through your hands. Seneca wrote that life is long if you know how to use it, but short if you waste it in distraction and worry. Marcus wrote that people act as if they will live forever, but then they die having never lived. For us today, the message cuts even deeper. Surrounded by distractions, it is easy to act as if life is unlimited. Phones buzz, tasks pile, days disappear. But the Stoics remind us to pause, to breathe, to look around and say, this moment is mine. This smile, this step, this word may be the last, so let me make it good. Memento mori is not about fearing the end. It is about fueling the present. When you accept that death is certain, you begin to live with more honesty, more gratitude, more urgency. You stop chasing what does not matter and start cherishing what does. Death walks beside us all, silent but constant. The Stoics chose to greet it as a teacher, and in listening, they learned how to live. The Stoics believed that comfort was a dangerous teacher. It lulls you into thinking life will always be soft, warm, and easy. But fortune is not gentle for long, and when hardship comes, it feels unbearable if you have never practiced it. This is why they spoke of voluntary discomfort, the strange habit of choosing small hardships in order to train the soul for greater trials. Seneca wrote in the 1st century after Christ that a man should sometimes sleep on the floor, eat coarse bread, and wear rough clothing, whispering to himself, "Is this what I feared?" By tasting poverty, even in small bites, he proved to himself that he could endure it, and that fear of loss was often worse than the loss itself. Epictetus, who had once been a slave, reminded his students that comfort is fragile. The body grows soft, the mind grows restless, and when life strikes, you shatter like glass. But the one who has practiced hunger, cold, and simplicity carries a kind of inner armor. If winter brings chill, he has already walked barefoot in the frost by choice. If food runs short, he has already fasted by design. Misfortune cannot shock him because he has met it before. This practice was not about hating comfort. The Stoics were not against warm meals or soft beds. They simply refused to be chained to them. They wanted freedom, the ability to walk calmly through both luxury and loss without being owned by either. By practicing voluntary discomfort, they broke the grip of fear. For us today, the thought sounds extreme, yet it hides a quiet wisdom. Think of how small hardships make you stronger. The runner who trains in the rain does not quit when the sky turns grey. The student who studies in noise finds peace in silence. The person who has slept under rough blankets does not tremble when the heater breaks. Each chosen struggle makes the unchosen ones lighter. Voluntary discomfort also teaches gratitude. After fasting for a day, even plain rice feels like a feast. After walking in the cold, a warm room feels like a palace. Comfort becomes sweeter when it is not constant. The Stoics saw this clearly. They knew that wealth could vanish, health could fade, reputation could crumble, but if you have learned to live simply, you can still live well. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that his body was mortal, subject to hunger and cold, yet he urged his mind to remain steady, to adapt, to use reason as a shield. The emperor and the beggar both faced hardship, but the one who had practiced it walked with less fear. Voluntary discomfort is not punishment, it is preparation. It is the quiet decision to taste difficulty, so that when life serves it without warning, you nod and say, "I have known you before," and in that moment you are free. The Stoics practiced a simple exercise that could dissolve anger, soften fear, and shrink problems that once felt enormous. They called it the view from above. It was not about climbing a mountain or flying through the sky, but about using imagination to change perspective. Marcus Aurelius, in the 2nd century after Christ, often told himself to look down on life from a higher place, as if rising above the city, above the empire, above the earth itself. From such a height, the noise of daily life grew faint, and worries that had once felt heavy became as small as grains of sand. Imagine it for yourself. You close your eyes and see your room. You rise upward, and the room becomes a dot. You rise higher, and your neighborhood spreads like a pattern, its streets and houses no more than shapes. Higher still, the city shrinks, the people below moving like tiny insects, their arguments and struggles inaudible. The higher you go, the more your view widens, until nations fade into patches of color and oceans curl around the planet like silk. From here, your anxieties look smaller. The rude comment at school, the deadline at work, the fear of embarrassment, all of them dissolve when compared to the vastness of the earth and the countless lives unfolding at this very moment. Marcus Aurelius used this vision not to belittle human life, but to put it in its place. He reminded himself that emperors and beggars alike vanish quickly, that fame is swallowed by time, that even the grandest victories fade. From above, the great and the small share the same fragile breath. To see this is not to despair, but to be freed from the chains of pride and worry. Seneca also wrote that we must look at life as if from a height, where fortune's blows seem less cruel because we see how brief they are in the endless flow of time. If pain comes, it comes for a while. If joy comes, it too will pass. From above, everything is in motion, and nothing lasts long enough to trap the soul. For us today, the view from above is more needed than ever. Surrounded by constant noise, our screens magnify every headline and comment until they feel overwhelming. But in truth, they are small. The world is wide, time is vast, and your troubles are not the center of the universe. This is not meant to make you careless, but to lighten your grip, to remind you that the storm you feel inside is a passing cloud in a larger sky. The view from above teaches humility, reminding us that our lives are fleeting sparks. Yet it also teaches compassion, because when you see all humanity as one, you realize that your neighbor, your rival, even your enemy, are fellow travelers sharing the same tiny world. To practice this vision is to walk back into your day with a calmer heart, because once you have seen the vastness, it is harder to be trapped by the small. Seneca lived in the 1st century after Christ, and though he was a statesman and philosopher, his most enduring wisdom came not from speeches, but from letters. He wrote to his friend Lucilius, with a tone both intimate and urgent, as if he were sitting across the table, speaking plainly about how to live. These letters carried lessons on time, anger, fear, and courage, but they were never written like dry lectures. They were words of a friend, practical and sharp, aimed at helping someone survive the storms of life. Imagine receiving such a letter today, tucked between the noise of notifications and endless feeds. A voice from 2,000 years ago reminding you to take your time seriously, to live deliberately, to stop waiting for tomorrow as if tomorrow were guaranteed. Seneca often told Lucilius that life is long enough if you know how to use it, but short if you waste it on distraction. He urged him to cut down on trivial pursuits and to give attention to what strengthens the soul. Translated into our world, this could mean putting the phone down for an hour, walking outside, and noticing the sky. A micro-habit, small but powerful, built on an ancient maxim. Another letter of his speaks about anger, describing it as temporary madness that chains the mind. Seneca urged his friend to pause before reacting, to remember that rage harms the one who carries it more than the one who receives it. Today, that advice could become the habit of waiting 5 breaths before sending a reply to a rude message. The pause itself is the armor, and within that pause you regain control. Seneca also wrote about wealth, warning that possessions are not evil but dangerous when they own you. He suggested practicing simplicity, eating plain food, or wearing simple clothes, not to punish yourself, but to remind the soul that happiness does not depend on gold. Modern life could mirror this by choosing one day a week to live simply, eating the most basic meal, stepping away from luxury, and learning again how little is required to feel whole. Each letter carried both philosophy and practice, never separating thought from action. He reminded Lucilius again and again that philosophy was not for classrooms, but for living, that its test was not in words but in daily choices. The beauty of his style was how personal it felt. He wrote as one human to another, with care and urgency, never pretending to be above the struggles he described. He admitted his own faults, his own slips, his own need for correction. That honesty made his words powerful. For us, reimagining Seneca's letters is like keeping a secret friend who sends you reminders across centuries. Each maxim becomes a habit. Each habit builds strength. The friendship outlives time itself because the struggles of being human have not changed. The letters still arrive if we choose to read them, and their counsel is as alive now as it was when first written. The Stoics spoke often of guarding the mind as carefully as a craftsman guards his tools. They saw attention as the workshop where character is shaped and where peace is either built or lost. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome in the 2nd century after Christ, reminded himself each morning that the mind is its own place, and that within it he could build an inner citadel, a fortress no chaos could breach. The way to build it was through attention, focusing on the present moment and refusing to be dragged by regret of the past or fear of the future. Attention was their version of mindfulness, though they never used that word. Epictetus told his students to stay awake to what they were doing, not to drift through tasks like sleepwalkers. He taught that when you walk, walk. When you speak, speak. When you eat, eat. It sounds simple, but it is the hardest training of all. The mind loves to scatter, to jump from one worry to another, from one distraction to the next. The Stoic answer was single tasking, bringing your whole presence into whatever lay before you. Seneca explained that nothing belongs to us more than the present, yet we trade it away for thoughts of yesterday and tomorrow. He warned that most people are absent from their own lives, alive in body but elsewhere in mind. The cure was to anchor yourself in the now, to treat each action, no matter how ordinary, as a chance to practice clarity. Even folding clothes or writing a sentence becomes a workshop exercise when done with full attention. This is not only about calm, but also about service. Marcus Aurelius wrote that every act should serve the common good, and that if you give yourself fully to the task of the moment, you live nobly. The attention you bring is not just for your own peace, but for the benefit of others. Listening to a friend without distraction, finishing work with care, offering kindness without hurry, these were the materials from which the inner citadel was built. In our age, the pull of distraction is constant. Devices beep, screens glow, and thoughts scatter into endless fragments. The Stoic workshop of attention feels more urgent than ever. Imagine carving out moments where you do one thing only. A meal without a phone. A walk without headphones. A study session without glancing at messages. In these small practices, the mind remembers its own strength. The citadel rises stone by stone, until inside you find a calm center untouched by the storm outside. The Stoics knew that control begins with where you place your attention. Let it scatter, and you are at the mercy of the world. Guard it, and you hold freedom, even in chains. The workshop is always open, and the tools are always at hand, waiting for you to pick them up and shape the mind into something steady, focused, and at peace. The Stoics never saw justice as something locked in dusty law courts or shouted in grand speeches. For them, it lived in daily clothes, woven into the ordinary moments of work, trade, and conversation. Justice was not distant, it was immediate, found in how you handled meetings, money, and speech. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of the vast Roman world, reminded himself that his power meant nothing if he did not treat others fairly. He wrote that justice is the foundation of all virtues, because courage, wisdom, and temperance mean little without fairness to bind them together. To him, justice was the simple act of remembering that every person you meet shares the same human dignity, whether slave or senator. In a marketplace, Seneca warned against cheating others, reminding his readers that gain made through dishonesty was no true gain at all. He insisted that the mind is never at peace when it thrives on unfairness. Money earned through deception becomes poison, and speech twisted by lies becomes a chain that binds the liar. To live with justice is to live with a clean mind, a mind that does not fear being discovered because it has nothing to hide. Epictetus urged his students to speak honestly, not to flatter the powerful or bend words for advantage. Honest speech, he explained, is freedom because it frees you from the exhausting task of managing masks and falsehoods. It also builds trust, and trust is the soil in which friendship and community grow. To speak with justice is not to be cruel, but to be clear, kind, and respectful of truth. The Stoics believed that justice was the path to an easy mind. When you choose fairness over friction, you release yourself from the restless weight of guilt and fear. The unjust person may win in the short run, but his nights are troubled, his conscience heavy. The just person, even if he loses money or status, carries peace within. That peace is more valuable than gold because it cannot be stolen. For us today, justice in daily clothes might look like honesty in meetings, refusing to take credit for another's work, or speaking truth even when silence feels safer. It is choosing fairness when handling money, paying people what they deserve, avoiding shortcuts that harm others. It is resisting gossip, telling the truth gently but firmly, and walking away from deceit. The practice may feel small, but it shapes a life that is steady and respected. Justice, the Stoics remind us, is not about heroic moments, but about steady habits. It is found in how you send an email, how you listen in conversation, how you divide the check at dinner. In each small choice, you build a mind free from turmoil. When you act with fairness, you act with strength, because you align your life with reason and with the shared dignity of humanity. Justice in daily clothes is the simplest garment, but it fits the soul best. The Stoics carried a phrase that still startles the modern ear: amor fati, the love of fate. At first it sounds like surrender, as if they were telling us to lie down and let life roll over us. But that was never their meaning. To love fate was not to give up, but to welcome reality as it is, and from that acceptance to act with clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private notes that whatever happens is woven into the fabric of the universe, and to resist it is like a dog tied to a moving cart, dragged unwillingly through the dust. The wiser choice is to walk with the cart, to accept the rope, and in that acceptance to find a strange freedom. Epictetus told his students that some things are in our power and others are not, and to spend energy fighting what is beyond control is to exhaust the soul. He urged them to meet events with readiness, not complaint. If rain falls, let it fall, but choose how to step in it. If loss comes, grieve with dignity, but remember that it was never yours to keep forever. Acceptance does not mean passivity. It means seeing the field clearly so you know where to place your effort. The Stoic does not say, "Fate has decided, so I will do nothing." He says, "Fate has given me this ground, this moment, this body, this chance, and within it I will act as best I can." Seneca explained that fortune may cut the sails, but the sailor still has a rudder and still must steer. Amor fati is the union of surrender and strength, the art of saying yes to the storm without losing the will to navigate it. For us today, This love of fate can ease the weight of frustration. A cancelled flight, an illness, a sudden change in plans can feel like theft. But to practice amor fati is to greet them not with bitterness, but with curiosity. What can I learn here? What can I do with this? How can I make this moment worthy? In that mindset, even obstacles become teachers. This is why Marcus wrote that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. To love fate is to refuse to waste life, wishing it were different while still shaping it with all your strength. Without this balance, acceptance curdles into fatalism. Fatalism says, nothing I do matters. Amor fati says, everything I do matters, but only if I first embrace reality. To deny the world is to weaken yourself, but to accept it fully is to unlock your power within it. Fate offers the canvas, but your choices paint the picture. The Stoics remind us that joy is not found in the world being perfect, but in our ability to meet it fully, to work with it, and to walk through it with calm resolve. To love fate is to live without bitterness, and to live without bitterness is the beginning of true freedom. The Stoics taught that life is a play, and we are given roles we did not choose. Epictetus said, we do not pick the length of the script or the part we play, but we can decide how well to perform it. Some are cast as parents, some as children, some as leaders, some as servants. None of these roles are entirely ours to choose, but within them lies the chance to live with dignity, patience, and care. This was called role ethics, the practice of living the roles handed to you with grace while remembering their limits. At the heart of this teaching was the idea of oikeiosis, a Greek word meaning belonging or fitting into the whole. The Stoics believed that each of us is connected, like threads in a single cloth. To live well is to understand that you are part of something larger, and to fulfill your place in harmony with others. A parent cannot control a child's fate, but can give love and guidance. A child cannot choose their parents, but can offer respect and gratitude. A partner cannot control every turn of life, but can walk with steadiness beside the one they love. A colleague cannot escape every unfair task, but can still act with fairness and honesty. By living roles in this way, life becomes less about control and more about contribution. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he was an emperor, but also a human being, a son, a friend, a servant of the common good. He balanced power with humility by remembering that his role was temporary and that when it ended, only his character would remain. Seneca warned that forgetting the limits of a role is dangerous. To overstep is to harm both yourself and others. A parent who tries to control every breath of their child forgets that the role is to guide, not to own. A leader who treats authority as absolute forgets that the role is to serve, not to dominate. Roles must be lived with grace, which means knowing both the duties and the boundaries. In our world, these lessons are alive every day. You do not always choose to be the caretaker of a sick family member, the sibling who must mediate conflict, or the employee handed extra responsibility. Yet, the Stoics remind us that even unwanted roles can be lived with steadiness. You may not like the part, but you can play it well, and in playing it well, you preserve your peace. To embrace roles without bitterness is to transform them into opportunities for virtue. The stage may change and the roles may shift, but the task is always the same: to act with justice, patience, and wisdom until the curtain falls. The Stoics teach that peace comes not from choosing your roles, but from choosing how to live them. And in that choice, every role, no matter how small or heavy, becomes a chance to practice the art of being human. The Stoics looked at anger and saw not strength but weakness, disguised as fire. Seneca wrote an entire book called On Anger, where he compared rage to a storm that blinds the eyes, shakes the body, and leaves destruction in its wake. He warned that people often think anger gives power, but in truth it robs judgment, makes enemies of friends, and turns courage into cruelty. To the Stoics, anger was a bad tool, like trying to carve wood with fire. It may burn quickly and make an impact, but what remains is charred and broken. Epictetus reminded his students that insults do not harm the soul unless the soul agrees to be harmed. When someone mocks you, they have only moved their lips, and sound has passed through the air. It is your judgment that turns those sounds into wounds. Anger rises when the mind forgets this, when it rushes to give assent to every insult and slight. The Stoic task is to pause, to step back, and to ask whether the anger is useful. Almost always, it is not. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of Rome, dealt with betrayal, lies, and constant pressure, yet he told himself each morning that people would be unjust, selfish, and rude. He reminded himself not to meet them with rage, but with understanding. To expect the world to be free of offence, he wrote, is like expecting the sea to be still forever. Anger may feel natural, but it is rarely wise. The Stoics did not deny that wrongs exist. They knew injustice, cruelty, and corruption as well as anyone. Their warning was that anger is a poor guide in dealing with them. Instead, they offered other tools: clarity, boundaries, and principled courage. Clarity is seeing the problem without smoke in the eyes, understanding what truly happened and what response is fitting. Boundaries are the steady walls you build to protect your time and dignity without needing rage to defend them. Principled courage is the willingness to act firmly for what is right without being poisoned by hatred. These tools do not flare up like anger, but they last longer and cut cleaner. In our time, anger is often celebrated as passion or authenticity. Yet the Stoics whisper a warning, reminding us that rage is easy, discipline is hard, and real strength lies in the latter. Imagine handling an insult with silence, refusing to give your peace away. Imagine correcting a wrong not with fury but with calm determination. Imagine setting a boundary without shouting, simply saying no and meaning it. These are not acts of weakness but of mastery. The Stoics saw that life is too short to be ruled by fire. Anger consumes the one who carries it, while clarity, boundaries, and courage leave the mind steady and free. When rage knocks at the door, the Stoic answer is simple: this is a bad tool. And then, with calm hands, they reach for something better. The Stoics are often misunderstood as cold and unfeeling, as if they believed grief was weakness and sorrow a failure. But this is not what they taught. Their word apatheia did not mean apathy. It meant freedom from destructive passion, not the absence of human emotion. They knew loss cuts deep. They knew tears fall unbidden. What they sought was not numbness, but balance, the strength to feel grief without being drowned by it. Seneca wrote tenderly about this in his letters. When a friend's child died, he did not scold him for sorrow. Instead, he reminded him that it is natural to mourn, that love leaves behind pain when the beloved is gone. But he urged moderation, not because tears are shameful, but because endless despair dishonors both the living and the dead. He wrote that the wise man sheds tears, but he does not collapse. He carries grief with steady hands. Marcus Aurelius faced death constantly, not only on battlefields but in his own family. Several of his children died young, and in his journal he reminded himself that sorrow was human. Yet he urged his own mind not to turn sorrow into bitterness. To lose is inevitable, he told himself, but to despair without end is a choice. He sought rituals of compassion, small acts that steadied the heart, remembering that all things are mortal. Offering kindness to those who suffer, giving thanks for the time shared rather than cursing the time lost. Epictetus, once a slave, spoke of grief with a different edge. He said that when a cup breaks, you grieve less than when a friend dies, but the truth is the same. Everything is given for a time. To pretend otherwise is to set yourself up for ruin. Yet even he allowed for sorrow. He only warned against letting grief become a storm that sinks the soul. The Stoics did not want you to silence your heart. They wanted you to steer it. In our world, the same challenge exists. When someone we love dies, or when dreams collapse, it is tempting either to fall apart completely or to lock away every feeling. The Stoics show us another way, to make space for grief, to honor it, but not to let it devour us. You can cry and still rise in the morning. You can mourn and still care for those who remain. You can carry sorrow without surrendering to despair. This is steady compassion, a way of holding your pain gently without letting it define you. Apatheia is not apathy. It is the strength to feel grief fully and yet remain upright. It is the courage to let sorrow soften you instead of hardening you. To live this way is to honor both love and loss. The Stoics remind us that hearts can break, but they can also endure, and in that endurance lies a quiet kind of wisdom. Marcus Aurelius never intended his private writings to become one of the most read books in history. His meditations were notes to himself, scraps of thought jotted down in tents on campaign or in the quiet of the palace at night. They were reminders, corrections, encouragements, a way of shaping his own mind. 2,000 years later, they still speak because they reveal a practice anyone can imitate, the inner journal. This habit is not about polished words or perfect sentences. It is about facing yourself honestly each day, morning and night, and using writing as a tool to guide your reactions. Marcus often began with morning intention. He reminded himself that the day ahead would bring selfish people, rude people, and liars. Yet he prepared not to hate them, but to understand that they acted out of ignorance. By setting this expectation, he gave himself armor against disappointment. You can try the same. In the morning, write down what you might face, not as a prediction of doom, but as preparation. If you expect traffic, you will not be shocked by it. If you expect stress at work, you will not crumble when it appears. Morning notes are like mental stretching before a long run. At night, Marcus turned to review. He asked himself what he had done well, where he had slipped, and how he could improve tomorrow. This was not harsh self-punishment, but honest reflection. Seneca also advised this practice, describing how each night he questioned his soul, asking what passion he had resisted, what temptation he had yielded to, and where he had acted nobly. For us, the nightly review can be as simple as asking, when did I lose my temper? When did I stay calm? When did I act with kindness? Writing it down makes the lesson sharper and the pattern clearer. Over time, these short notes rewire the mind. Instead of drifting through life, you begin to live with attention, watching your own reactions and guiding them with reason. The Stoics saw journaling as a training ground for the soul. It was a private dialogue, a conversation with yourself that no one else needed to hear. In our world, where so much writing is performed for likes and comments, this private honesty is rare and powerful. You are not writing to impress, you are writing to improve. A notebook can become your inner citadel, the place where you confront your own flaws and encourage your better self. Marcus's words remind us that even emperors needed this daily practice. If the ruler of the known world still had to remind himself to be patient, kind, and brave, then how much more do we need the same? The inner journal is not about perfection, it is about steady growth. Morning intention points your day in the right direction. Nightly review brings it to rest with clarity. Between the two, life slowly bends toward wisdom. The Stoics never knew glowing screens or buzzing phones, yet their warnings about guarding the mind feel like they were written for our age. They taught that the soul becomes coloured by what it consumes, and that careless attention is like leaving the gates of a city wide open for invaders. Today, the invaders are not soldiers, but endless notifications, headlines crafted to spark fear, and algorithms designed to keep us scrolling long past the point of peace. Seneca wrote that life is not short, but we make it short by wasting time on distractions. He urged his readers to be careful about what voices they let into their minds, since each one leaves a trace. Imagine if he lived today. He would likely warn against giving whole mornings to feeds filled with outrage or gossip, because nothing eats time faster than noise disguised as news. The Stoic answer is not withdrawal, but discipline, what we might call a media diet. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the mind is dyed by its thoughts, and that he must wash away any stain that pulls him from reason. In practice, this means curating inputs with care. Choose what you read and watch as you would choose food, not by how sweet it tastes in the moment, but by how it nourishes or poisons the spirit. For us, this could mean setting limits on how often we check the news, or following voices that calm and inform rather than inflame. Epictetus urged his students to remember that you always have the power to turn away from what disturbs you. He would have told us that no one forces us to scroll through endless images or dive into every argument online. The choice to look or not to look is ours, and with that choice, we shape our peace. Timed exposure was another unspoken Stoic tactic. Just as they trained themselves to endure cold or hunger for a season, we can train ourselves to face the noise in small doses. Read the headlines once a day instead of every hour. Step into the stream, gather what you need, then step back before the current sweeps you away. The rest of the time belongs to you, to your work, your family, your thoughts, your calm. Technology is powerful, but without discipline, it becomes a master instead of a tool. The Stoics remind us that freedom lies in control of the self, not in surrender to outside forces. Algorithms may be clever, but they cannot touch the mind that has learned to guard its gates. Each time you resist the urge to check, each time you choose silence over noise, you strengthen that inner citadel they spoke of. Peace does not mean ignorance. It means control. The Stoics would tell us that what matters is not knowing everything instantly, but knowing what is enough, and living with calm inside a world addicted to noise. The Stoics believed that true leadership was never about spectacle, but about service. Marcus Aurelius ruled the vast Roman Empire, commanded armies, and faced plagues, wars, and betrayal, yet his writings reveal no taste for drama. Again and again, he reminded himself that he was a servant of the common good, that his authority was not for display, but for duty. This quiet strength was the essence of Stoic stewardship, calm authority without ego, guiding others without stirring chaos. Seneca warned that leaders who chase attention are like actors playing for applause, pleasing the crowd for a moment, but leaving behind little of worth. He argued that a ruler or a manager, even a parent in the small empire of a family, must look to what is useful, not to what is dazzling. Leadership without drama means choosing substance over show, steady decisions over heated reactions. It means recognizing that anger and pride may win a moment but lose a lifetime of trust. Epictetus, who trained future statesmen, told his students that control begins with the self. A leader who cannot rule his own temper cannot rule others well. Calm is not weakness, he insisted. Calm is power. To pause when others rage, to speak evenly when others shout, to hold steady when others panic. These are the marks of someone who commands respect without demanding it. De-escalation was one of the Stoics' quiet superpowers. Marcus often wrote about refusing to meet insults with insults, choosing instead to absorb tension and return reason. In politics, in business, even in households, this ability to cool the fire is more valuable than any show of dominance. The Stoic leader does not fan sparks into flame, but dampens them into peace. In our time, leadership without drama feels more radical than ever. Modern culture often celebrates loud voices, quick tempers, and flashy gestures, but the Stoics remind us that noise is not strength. Imagine a boss who listens more than he speaks, who corrects mistakes without humiliation, who accepts blame without excuses. Imagine a teacher who calms a classroom storm not with shouting but with steadiness. Imagine a friend who guides a group out of conflict by lowering his own voice, instead of raising it. These are Stoic leaders, rare but unforgettable. The Stoics also taught that leadership is a responsibility, not a privilege. To stand above others means to stand in service to them. Marcus wrote that a king is nothing more than the chief servant of his people. For us, this truth remains. Authority is not about being obeyed, but about protecting, guiding, and lifting those who depend on you. Leadership without drama is not glamorous. It does not draw crowds or create headlines, but it builds trust, earns loyalty, and leaves behind a legacy of peace. The Stoics knew that storms are loud, but steady rivers carve the land. The leader who chooses calm over ego, service over pride, and de-escalation over fury shapes the world in quieter but deeper ways. The Stoics lived in turbulent times. Empires rose and fell, wars broke out, plagues swept through cities, and injustice filled the streets. Yet they never taught indifference. They believed deeply in justice, in duty, in standing up for what was right. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he was born to work with others for the common good. Epictetus told his students that the measure of philosophy was not in words, but in actions that benefit the community. Seneca urged his friends to step into public life, even when it was dangerous, because retreat into private comfort, while others suffered, was no true wisdom. But the Stoics also knew that the fight for justice can burn people out if they cling to results beyond their control. They taught a balance, activism with equanimity, caring fiercely but without being consumed by the fire. The heart of this teaching lies in the dichotomy of control. You can choose your actions, but not the outcome. You can speak the truth, but you cannot make others listen. You can fight for fairness, but you cannot dictate the pace of change. To tie your peace to success in the eyes of the world is to guarantee despair. To tie your peace to acting justly, no matter what happens, is to walk through struggle with strength. Marcus often wrote that the fruit of justice is to do what is right, not to be praised for it. A just act carries its worth in itself, whether the crowd cheers or jeers. Epictetus gave the same counsel. He said to imagine being a messenger carrying a letter. Your job is to deliver it faithfully, not to control how it is received. The activist, in Stoic terms, is one who lives by principle, not by prediction. This mindset frees energy for endurance. Instead of burning out on what you cannot fix, you focus on what you can give. Instead of drowning in frustration, you move with steady rhythm, returning again and again to what justice demands today. For us, in a world of constant headlines and crises, this lesson matters deeply. Many people care passionately about climate, equality, freedom, or compassion, but the flood of bad news makes them feel hopeless. The Stoics would remind us that hopelessness is not required. You must care, but you must also guard your inner citadel. Read enough to act wisely, but not so much that despair paralyzes you. Speak where your voice can matter, but do not waste your soul on endless arguments with those who will not hear. Justice is not a sprint but a long walk, and only equanimity keeps your steps steady. The Stoics did not promise victory, only meaning. To act justly is to fulfill your role as a human being, even if the world resists you. Activism with equanimity is the art of holding both fire and calm, fierce commitment joined with steady peace. It is the refusal to give up and the refusal to be consumed. It is, in the end, the only way to keep fighting without losing yourself. Imagine the day beginning in silence, the first light of dawn slipping through your window. Marcus Aurelius used these early hours to remind himself of what lay ahead. People will be selfish, rude, and demanding, he wrote, but I must not be like them. You take a deep breath and set an intention, not for perfection but for steadiness. The morning becomes your first chance to live stoically. As you prepare for the day, you practice simplicity. Eat without rushing, noticing the taste of even a plain meal. Seneca would say that gratitude for the simplest food trains you to be content in any circumstance. When you leave for work or school, the commute becomes another exercise. Instead of cursing traffic or delays, you remember Epictetus. Some things are in your control, some are not. You cannot move the cars faster, but you can choose patience. A delay becomes practice in self-rule, not wasted time. At work, the inbox fills like a tide, demanding more than seems possible. Here, the Stoic filter is useful. Ask what truly matters. Marcus advised cutting away what is unnecessary so that your energy is spent on tasks aligned with justice and duty. You answer the urgent, postpone the trivial, and refuse to drown in noise. Even conflict becomes a training ground. When someone criticizes you unfairly, the old impulse to flare up returns, but you pause. Seneca warned that anger is temporary madness. You breathe, speak calmly, and set boundaries without cruelty. The fire fades because you did not add fuel. Through the day, the Stoics would also urge moments of gratitude. Notice the sunlight on a wall, the laughter of a friend, the warmth of tea in your hands. Memento mori, remember you must die, is not a shadow, but a reminder that these ordinary moments are treasures. To live stoically is to notice them before they vanish. Afternoon brings weariness, and here voluntary discomfort helps. You push through without constant snacks or distractions, reminding yourself that the body is stronger than it claims. Epictetus trained his students by giving them small hardships so that larger ones would not shake them. You remind yourself that you can endure, that fatigue is not defeat. As the evening arrives, the tone shifts. You slow down and take time for others. Marcus saw service to others as the essence of a good life. You listen to a friend without checking your phone. You play with a child. You speak honestly and kindly to those around you. These acts are not interruptions to philosophy. They are the heart of it. Finally, at night, you return to the inner journal. Seneca advised reviewing the day with honesty. Ask yourself, where did I act with wisdom? Where did I slip? Where can I improve tomorrow? You write a few lines, not to impress, but to learn. Then, with gratitude, you close your eyes. The Stoic day ends as it began, with calm intention. Sunrise to sunset, philosophy is not an idea, but a rhythm of life. The manuscript closes, its worn pages carrying the voices of philosophers long gone, yet still alive in thought. The painted porch of Athens may have faded into ruins, but the spirit of the Stoa remains, not in stone but in practice. The narrator sets the book aside and looks around, realizing that the porch is everywhere. It is in the crowded train where patience is tested. It is in the heated meeting where honesty and fairness must be chosen. It is in the quiet bedroom where gratitude whispers before sleep. The wisdom of the Stoics was never locked in libraries. It was meant for life itself, woven into the hours of ordinary people. What was lost for many centuries is not really lost. It waits in simple reminders, ready to steady anyone who picks them up. The Stoics have handed down a compact rule for peace, one that fits in the pocket of the mind and can be carried anywhere. Control what is yours, accept what is not, and act with virtue in all. Within those words lie courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom. Within them lie freedom from fear, relief from anger, and strength in the face of sorrow. They are not abstract theories. They are tools, practical and sharp, tested by men who faced slavery, exile, power, and death. They do not promise a life without hardship, but they promise that hardship need not rule the soul. Seneca reminds you that time is your most precious treasure. Epictetus urges you to guard your ruling faculty, to keep your choices free from chains. Marcus Aurelius calls you to rise each morning with duty, to live as if every day could be your last and therefore must not be wasted. Together, they offer not despair but resilience, not numbness but deeper compassion, not surrender but strength. As the last words of the manuscript echo, The narrator feels a shift. Peace is not waiting somewhere in the future. It is possible now, in this moment, by applying the wisdom carried across 2,000 years. The porch is not a building in Athens. It is wherever you stand, if you choose to live with clarity and calm. The compact peace rule becomes a whisper you can carry, a guard against fear, a compass for action. When anger rises, remember clarity. When loss comes, allow grief but not ruin. When fortune tempts, prefer virtue. When despair looms, lift your view from above. Philosophy is not distant. It is a steady companion, a light that follows you through each ordinary day. The narrator leaves the library not with secrets but with tools, not with heavy doctrines but with a lighter heart. The Stoics, once thought to be lost, are found again each time their teachings are lived. Their wisdom is no longer buried in dusty pages. It is alive wherever someone chooses courage over fear, fairness over greed, temperance over impulse, and wisdom over distraction. The porch is everywhere, and peace is closer than it seems.